please make sure to hit that like button and comment below. Subscribe for a lot more content. If you haven't yet checked out the podcast on Spotify and iTunes, we would love to see you on over there. Additionally, if you want to find out more about creating wealth in real estate and get mortgage financing done better, reach out to the team here at Thrive Mortgage Co. at thrivemortgage.ca or on Instagram at Thrive Mortgage Co. Another episode of your favorite show because you tuned in today to listen to the best of the best of the best. Guys, we're always trying to find different ways and opportunities to make this show interesting. I know we focus obviously a lot on finances, wealth, investing, but we get a lot of feedback and a lot of questions to diversify and look at different types of real estate because a lot of people think of an investment in real estate as a personal investment as well. And so we have an expert coming on the show today. Her name is Tammy Rose. I've known Tammy since, honestly, I think since she started in real estate back in 2015 or 2016. I met her early on, and her attitude is infectious. She is a great person through and through, and she knows what she's talking about. And I'm so excited to have her come on the show today to share with you guys a whole whackload of stuff about buying an acreage, a farmland, a large piece of land, and just all the things that you need to look out for. I think you'll probably be surprised by some of the things that she says and said, and we were soaking it all in. So again, as always, the show is brought to you by Thrive Mortgage Co. 3 partners here focused on creating wealth for our clients and our families for life. You guys are with us for life. You're stuck with us if you're working with us. So hey, as always, I am here to share with you guys the most recent 5-star review. And the cool thing is if you give us a 5-star review and then you send us a screenshot with your information and letting us know that it's you, we will send you a beautiful Thrive mug. We got some new colors and we got some new designs coming along with a delicious coffee. If you're loving the show, please tag us on Instagram, share us out. That is the best way to give us some love aside from the 5-star reviews, of course. So today's review is from Oh My Goodness. So I wish I discovered this podcast sooner. Such an informative podcast. I wish I discovered it. I'm clueless when it comes to everything related to investments and real estate, but this podcast has been a game changer. You've chosen such relevant topics and have made something so difficult and dry to digest, fun and relatable. Thanks for doing what you do. Look forward to more content. Thank you so much for that awesome review, and I really appreciate the enthusiasm behind it. So there is a mug and coffee coming your way. In any case, guys, I hope you enjoy this episode as much as we did. It was a fun one. We'll talk to you soon after the show. Take care. What's up, guys? You are listening to the YVR Remo Show, where we talk all things Vancouver real estate and mortgages, take boring topics and make them interesting. Make sure to stay tuned to listen to everything you need to know how to put cash back in your pocket, create wealth in real estate, and simplify the complicated. Thanks for joining us. We are going to talk all about acreages. It's a topic that a lot of people probably want to know something about, and it's mysterious to a lot of people, except for you, of course.
Okay.
So I'm pumped to have you come down and talk about it.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me on.
Cool. Okay. So when you started in real estate right off the bat, did you right away say, I want to sell farms or acreages or these types of properties? Or was it just like did you just get into it somehow?
I've always wanted to focus on farms and acreages. That's something I've always been really comfortable with. However, there is that learning curve when you get into real estate and you're just like, well, I also need to show that I can do real estate and, test the waters, because not everybody's going to hire you to sell a multi-million-dollar acreage or property right off the bat. So, I just focused on residential, getting, dipping your toes in the water, getting into that. And then really wanted to make sure I didn't get pigeonholed into only being a farm realtor, because I do like helping like first-time home buyers and other types of clients too. So I just kind of gradually evolved into this farm type brand, and my social just kind of reflects that, as you guys see, and just kind of became what it is now.
Awesome. Well, to your point about working, you like to work with first-time buyers and other types of people and doing residential property. I think that's a fair thing to say, not even just from a starting point, just because from your personality, obviously, I know you like to get along with people pretty easily. You're easygoing, which makes
most of the
people,
time anyways.
Most of the time, yeah, except for when you're in the farm. But aside from that, I think realistically speaking, most people generally gravitate towards you. So it made it really easy probably to start up with that. But to the idea of like not being quote unquote pigeonholed, I think just knowing you and the way that you've operated, you really like to know your stuff. And so I know how many years you've been spending time like doing research and learning and testing the waters and trying different things. So it's kind of neat to see where you've come 5 or 6 years in, because you're not only really good at the residential side and taking care of the people side, but now when you match that up with the acreage side, I think you've kind of got the best of both worlds, just in my experience. Because I don't know what your feedback is, Dean, here, but typically when I think of acreage realtor or farm realtor, they're either a super rough around the edges, and I mean like
Yeah.
super rough around the edges, and they have no business acumen at all, and so
Yeah.
they have a hard time running a business, or the exact opposite, and they're super stuck up. And so I feel like you've done a good job of blending two to get the two together, and so I think you're going to just continue to crush it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point, especially that you still focus on the bread and butter, the townhomes, the regular single family homes. I would imagine that a lot of sellers that have had an acreage all their life, getting older, they need to go somewhere else at some point in time, so you can facilitate both of those transactions, right?
Yeah.
Where would you say, like, what drove you towards just focusing on farms, focusing on acreages, outside of just the fact that you lived on one all your life? Was there something else that just drove you to continue to like have that passion to want to sell those properties?
So I think it's kind of the same with any, self-employed individual. You want to find what gets you excited. So anytime I walk on acreage, anytime I'm walking around a farm, I'm just into it. I love explaining farms. A big part about selling farms is actually showing people how to live on acreage, giving them little tips about living on acreage. And I mean, you can just kind of pull that from your own personal experience. So it was pretty much like a no-brainer for me to really focus on farms. And
Cool. Yeah, there's something to be said about like actually enjoying what you're doing. So that makes
yeah,
a lot of sense. That's
yeah.
awesome.
I get very excited if I get to bring my muck boots out and go in the rain and slop through a field versus,
Yeah, I don't know how many times you told me where you're
yeah,
showing like an acreage or a lot or something like that, and you have a realtor show up with their fancy car and their like high heels or like dress shoes, and you're just like, what are you doing?
I think we've even like discussed mortgages while I'm on a horse before. You're like, what's that noise? I'm like, that's
I'm
I'm
riding
on a
horse.
horse. That's a footprint there.
That's awesome.
Footfall, yeah.
So like getting into like, there's a couple things that we want to talk about. We had some questions from some people in asking what they want to know about the acreages, and I think one of the biggest things is well, there's a lot of things. So is really just understanding first and foremost, like what do you even look for from a pricing perspective? Like if someone's looking to purchase a farm, where do you even start? Like, or not farm, I should say. Let's go back. Sorry, acreages in general. Like, where do you even start in that conversation?
So I think the main question that you need to ask yourself, if you're looking for acreage or if you have a client looking for acreage, is going to be what is their intended use of that property? So that right there is going to be the main, like the pivotal starting point for you. And then from there, you're going to branch out to like the zoning, if there's anything on the property that could impact, like we were speaking about earlier, like potentially like creeks, anything like that with setbacks. Just anything else about the property, unless you know the intended use for it, it's really hard to advise somebody correctly on it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's a lot there. And even
Yeah, a
just you
lot.
mentioned a farm acreage, like even just that alone is such a big difference, right? Like what would you say? I know it's a loaded question, but like a farm versus an acreage, what would be the key difference to that? Like I guess how would you sum that up in one sentence?
Man, I guess acreages, typically you're not having, you're doing it for like your own personal use kind of
Right.
thing, right?
Okay.
Farms, you kind of, there's like that borderline, you go acreage and then you go hobby farm, and you can still, hobby farm and acreage can be used kind of interchangeably for the most part up to, a certain size. But again, they're all so different. So you could call one an acreage, you call another one a farm. Typically it's like animals or crops. Some potential use on it is going to differentiate the two though.
So like a farm is almost a business in a way. You're essentially running a business on the property, whether it's crops or, raising animals or what have you, right?
Yeah, and it could be. I mean, there's two types of, I guess, farms out there. So there's just your typical farm status. So you get a certain amount of money from your farm per year, and that helps you out from like a taxes standpoint. So you're not really making an income, to be completely honest. You don't
Right.
really make any money from doing that, but you do save on your taxes. Versus if you're a bona fide farmer, that is like whole other ball game, and that's when you do use it as a business.
Okay.
Okay, so jumping into just generally speaking, like looking for these properties, like You've got like, again, we've got some slides that you were sharing with us before about what to look for, so it's a good
Mhm.
reference point here. But like, realistically speaking, like when you're going out there and you're kind of looking at these properties, you noted like just drinking water, you noted the sewer
Mhm.
and septic and things like that. Again, like for a typical residential property, you're not really thinking about these things. You've noted the ground. Like, what are some different things? Like, why don't we start off generally speaking, like with the
Mhm.
ground and the land and area and so forth? Like, where do you start to look at this, and where does that impact, I guess, a buyer looking at these properties, like specifically speaking? So just the land itself, like what are we looking for?
So the land itself, I mean, first things first, again, it goes based on your usage. But like type of soil that you need on the property, if it's a gravel base, if it's a clay base underneath, those two differences are going to be pretty substantial when you're using the property. Just for example, we ended up getting from I think it was the owners before us on our farm, they put some clay based fill under certain areas on the property. Those areas, like no matter what we do, we cannot fix the drainage on them. They're always wet, they're always mucky. Versus if you have like the proper gravel fill in certain areas, they're a lot easier to maintain, easier to fix. So if you do have a high use area, high use traffic area, having the gravel base is going to be huge as far as that goes. Um, you mentioned like for drinking water and stuff. You want to know
Yeah,
about
yeah. I
that?
mean, you had
Okay.
talked a little bit about well water
Hmm.
versus, some other types of water. Like again, something that you don't think about as a typical home in a city.
Hmm.
So like, what are we looking for there?
Yeah, so some acreages do have city water, so that's considered a bonus for people looking. So that is going to make the cost of your property typically go up as far as value goes. But the majority of acreages, though, are going to be on a well. So there's different types of wells even within that. So that is a good question to be asking the original owners of it or the current owners. So you've got drilled well, shallow well, as well as cisterns. So often when there's a shallow well on a property, there will also be a backup cistern just in case the needs can't be met by that initial well. So
Mm.
if they do mention that there's a shallow well in the property, a backup question would be like, okay, great. Is there a cistern just in case your water levels get low?
Hmm.
Another thing about, I mean, like water quality is, and again, a lot of people don't really realize this, and it's kind of fun to go through because, seeing people's faces. I'm like, did you know certain areas have arsenic in the water? And you just see people's faces like, oh my gosh, like arsenic. And I'm like, well, it's not actually like that intense. Like it's okay. But the majority of acreages do have a water filtration system.
Right.
So based on what they find in the water samples, they have different systems to treat that.
That's a really good point. I bought a home on property and I had a high level of arsenic in my water and I didn't test it when I bought the home. And you turn your shower on and it smells like almost like a copper, like it's a weird, really weird smell. Like it's almost like a musky old smell.
Yeah.
Like this is not
Yeah.
right. So that's a really good point.
And we have a filtration system on our main house, but we don't have one going out to our barn. So our barn water does not look as clean, even though it tests completely fine for like the animals to be drinking it, but it has a slight sulfur smell to it. But only like summertime kind of thing, right? It just like randomly has kind of a bit of a sulfur
Right.
smell.
That's what I meant to say.
The
Yeah.
sulfur
Sulfur.
one?
Yeah.
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 But the main house, for my specific area, it tests for manganese.
Interesting.
Okay.
Manganese and iron. So,
Interesting.
you'll go into a lot of acreages and be like, oh, like the toilets are really dirty. And it's actually just hard water.
Huh.
So,
It is hard on your, like, if you don't actually have a filtration system, it is quite hard on your faucets and everything else.
it turned me into a strawberry blonde for a couple of years until we got the right filtration system. It was
Wow.
a running joke. Everybody called me a redhead, and I'm like, I swear I'm blonde. How much money I paid at salons to get it fixed every single time. So it's
So
definitely good to know.
so if you want to change your hair
Yeah.
color, good idea.
Yeah.
If you don't, get your water checked out. So
Yeah,
so one of the
exactly.
things that you've talked about in the past is, some different types of people look to invest in
Hmm.
acreages
Hmm.
or farms, but there's a different type of consideration in these types of properties. And I mean, I guess just starting off, just having a look through what you've noted here in the file is that if for some people buying a farm, there's a situation where they're not necessarily, it's not about cash flow or investment from that standpoint. I think a lot of these
Hmm.
people are looking to buy the land per se more so and hold it for a long time. But you also noted that a lot of these people will actually take less than, for example, like typical market rent.
Yeah.
So why would they do that, and what does that look like from an investing standpoint?
So when you're looking at like a larger acreage and there's, renters on the property, typically Of course, it's not the same all across the board, but a lot of acreages charge less as far as rent goes for help around the property. So it is a way for renters to live on a little bit of property and get that country vibe, but still help out the landowners.
That makes sense. I mean, it's not an easy job maintaining that
No.
property.
No, it's not.
Yeah, and I'm sure you know that. Maybe you could just like, what is that like? Like maintenance on a big property like this? Like,
Maintenance on a farm. Wow. It depends on the season. So, I mean, wintertime, I mean, if it snows, you know, I'm sitting on a tractor for a few hours clearing snow just so we can get wheelbarrows into the animals to clean the animals' pens out. If the pipes freeze, you've got to deal with like burst pipes and getting water out to the animals. So we're very fortunate. We have a generator on our property. So that is a big, I definitely recommend doing that if you live on property.
oh, for sure.
So we've actually had neighbors call us and be like, hey, can we borrow some, or not borrow, but like come and pick up some water because, you know, either the power goes out and the well's not working or, you know, the pipes froze, anything like that.
That's such a good point about the generator, because when the power goes out, like you don't just lose power, you lose water because you're on a well.
Yeah.
So now you have no water, and the power doesn't come back on as quick out there.
No, it doesn't.
Like they
No.
focus on those high density areas, and like we're out for power for days, literally.
Yeah, I
not
grew up
fun.
without having a generator, and I was like, if you see the trees starting to like blow a bit, I was like, okay, everybody grab a bucket, fill up the tub,
Yeah.
so that you've got like water to
What
flush
is
the
this
toilets.
world?
Yeah.
What
You
is
know,
this
put
world?
everything you can into the freezer and like keep it
Totally.
shut as long as you can.
Yeah. I remember
So
my
get a
neighbor saying
generator.
like,
yeah.
make sure there's always water in your tub, full of water. I'm like, what? Like, what are you
What
talking
is
about?
this?
Who are these people? Okay, let's
Yeah.
get back on track with the investment piece. So like why, like I guess let's talk about that just in general. Like why the heck are the people looking to buy these acreages or land? Like what is the investment potential? Like what are the different ways that you can make money from an investment standpoint buying these properties? I mean, in your like what you've seen.
From what I've seen, the majority of people buying a larger piece of land, it's a passion thing. It's something they've always wanted to do. And they just really want to get on there for them, for their future family, especially with the prices going how they are. The people that are buying the acreages right now are in a really good position to set their families up for the future, versus using it as like a shorter term investment, like if you're going for like a condo and quick rental income like that.
Okay. We talked before this, before we were even recording here about like development areas and what to look for and so forth. So like, I don't know if you're involved in this at all, but have you ever been working with people that are looking to buy like a large piece of land for the purpose of future development? Is that a consideration that you've looked at or helped out with or seen?
It is. I've had a few conversations with clients for that. Typically, I think I attract more of like the hobby farmer, let's build a dream together people. Those are my people. we get along really well together. But I have advised other clients on larger pieces of land. I will say a main thing. ALR, if you're something that's in ALR, it's very, very challenging to get it out of ALR. The guidelines are extremely strict. I've personally spoken with even just the township about subdividing. And even though it looks like you can, because you might be surrounded by smaller properties, they're extremely strict. And a lot of the smaller properties in ALR were done prior to their rule change. So like myself, we're on just shy of 10 acres. We're surrounded by 4-acre properties, and there's no way they will let us.
That's a good point.
Even though we have 2 road frontages, everything is like, it's like long, it would be set up perfectly. It's a no-go.
That's really interesting. So like definitely something, is that something that you would talk to someone about before they went in? Yeah. On the type of property? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a huge thing too. If you have multi-families looking or multi-generations looking to purchase together, especially with ALR, if you look, you could look on, let's just say Langley, for example, right? So you look on Township of Langley based on the zoning. You're like, oh, I can put this many houses on this property. But you need to be aware that the ALR or ALC, they have jurisdiction over the township. So they're the ones that are like, no, you can't actually do a secondary dwelling. They're going to be the ones that you need to double check on. Don't just check with your township or city.
Super, super interesting.
I was just going to ask, like pooled resources, like 2 families, or 3 families coming together, putting their resources together to essentially live on the property itself. But yeah, it's a good point. You need to like really know what you can do on that property.
Yeah, and that's what we had done with ours. It is a family farm, but fortunately we were able to do that before they changed the restrictions. So if we were to sell our property now, the new owners would have different guidelines.
Do you
So it'd be
see
different.
do you see clients still in that type of structure where you got 2 families, 3 families coming together, and instead of going with multiple homes, maybe just going with a larger home and multiple like suites as an example? Is that something that's common?
You're seeing more of it now.
Okay.
I think a fair amount of people purchase their property hoping and thinking that they could build multiple dwellings. Even when I'm selling acreages, I have people still coming up now and they're like, yep, I'm going to build this and I'm going to build this. And I was like, I'm sorry to tell you, you can't. Like, it's not an option anymore. And some of the things, I mean, a coach house for me, you know, you wouldn't even think off the top of your head, like a coach house, that's not a secondary dwelling. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, of course, you guys would think that, right? Because you deal with that stuff.
Yeah.
But a lot of people going into it just think, oh, no, I'm just talking like a mobile or a modular or a detached. It also includes like, you know, a suite above a barn or a suite above a
Right.
shop.
Yeah.
So.
And it's something that we get, I see this all the time. Like I had a client yesterday and he's like, well, I'm going to go buy ALR because I can go build multiple, you know, dwellings and I can run my businesses on it and a number of things. Like you may want to talk to a few people ahead of time first to before you go forward with that decision. So that's an interesting, really good conversational piece.
Yeah, and you mentioned like 10 acres, your property's 10 acres. What would you say the average sized acreage would be in like the Fraser Valley that you're commonly seeing? That like is there a common size or is it pretty kind of all over the map?
It's honestly all over the map. I would say the larger properties have been in like families for generations, so you're not seeing them come up as frequently. This year, though, there are more larger properties coming onto the market than we've seen the last little while. So I think, you know, we find fairly often that people that do an acreage hold on to it a lot longer than maybe they should have physically. And then they get to a point where they're like, oh no, now I know I need to sell this large farm. So we're kind of running into that. But
Is that impacting the price points at which people are selling right now? Are they selling for less than they might otherwise? Or are you just seeing more people are listing because they have to get out of that financial situation?
no, I don't think it's so much a financial. I think most of the larger ones have been paid off. Like, you know, they bought it for pennies, like in today's you know market.
It's just the labor, I would assume.
It's just it costs so much to maintain them, like hydro bills.
Right.
Just the work to maintain it. If your fence goes down in a windstorm, I mean, just paying to fix that or doing the work yourself, which a lot of them are used to doing.
So which actually brings me up to my next point. I was going to ask you about like, what are the ways to benefit financially from an acreage? And I mean, I had some notes that I made here, but you could probably add to it. I had like, you know, horse boarding or animals and maybe there's some rental income or leasing. Like, what do you usually see there?
It depends on who's buying it. So I've had people want to make, you know, an herb farm on their property. And I was like, okay, that is one I didn't really consider. Like, I didn't think there was that big of a return on that.
Yeah.
For a while, their garlic farming was really big. But I mean, with any crops too, you're juggling the environment with it. So people I find are going to more, I don't know, predictable ways of doing it. You know, like obviously,
do you see like subleasing
cattle.
of space or just like animals?
Yeah, I mean, you can also sublease to a bona fide farmer, and that'll help you get your farm status if you live on it. But again, you're not really making a ton of money by doing that. You're just putting your land to use.
I always thought from like just thinking of your typical reno flip single family home, like I always thought of an acreage, like you mentioned, you know, poor ground conditions with, you know, clay base. Like, do you see value in somebody buying like a rundown farm and, you know, putting some like if they have experience with excavation and just heavy equipment coming in and fixing like ground issues and just general repair and then flipping it? Like, is that something that people look at for an investment?
100%. If you have somebody who has the connections and the ability within that industry, that is a really good way to flip a property, is improve your ground quality. A lot of people buying acreages want to put their own touches on the house anyways, and the ground and the outbuildings are going to be more important to them. Of course, with smaller acreages, so if you're looking at like 1 to 2 acres, it swaps around again. So, you know, like a 1 acre, like a half acre, 1 acre, 2 acre, you still have the majority of people looking for the house, and then the acreage is kind of like a bonus.
Right.
It's like extra
that makes
space.
sense.
But anything over 2 acres, if you can put money into like maintaining like the fences and, you know, the footing and everything.
And not that that's a cheap, like I know like
It's
excavation.
not cheap. It's not cheap.
It's
at all.
not cheap, but somebody
Yeah.
that is in that type of an industry that runs their own heavy equipment company, like that could be an option, right?
It could,
Cool.
yeah.
No, it makes there's just so many considerations, and it just kind of continues to make me think about just the importance of working with somebody who knows this stuff. And just having a quick note on some of the things that we haven't even touched on yet to look out for. You had talked about neighbors briefly in this call.
Oh, yes, neighbors. So it's a good one to bring up. Thank you. And I'm not just talking about your human neighbors, of course. If you see a big structure next door, down the road, double check. It might be a turkey farm or a mushroom barn. They can emit quite the lovely smell, especially in the middle of summer. So, your beautiful patio that you're buying with a hot tub might not be as enjoyable in the warmer seasons. So things like that are really good to just know the area and just know what you're getting into.
That's a really good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about like you mentioned grandfathered buildings? You were referring, I think, primarily to if you have multiple buildings on the property.
Yeah. So if you are selling a property or looking to purchase a property, some of the buildings may have been grandfathered in. So you'll often find this if there's like a smaller heritage house on the property and then a larger new build or newer build. Just want to double check and see what the requirements are on that, because chances are it's operating totally fine how it is right now.
Yeah.
However, if you take it over, it's then an unauthorized or an illegal suite.
Yeah.
So as you guys know, there's different ways to handle that going forward.
I'm just laughing right now because I'm reading some of your notes here, and it says you're talking about best practices when you're actually out there looking at properties. So for anyone listening to this, if it was your goal, and we do talk to people all the time who want to buy what they call an acreage, maybe it's just a larger lot and so forth. And there's little things in here like if you hear a clicking noise.
Yeah.
Have you had an experience there?
Yeah. It's funny from my standpoint, but probably not so much for the person who didn't realize it was an electric fence. So, if you do hear clicking,
Don't touch the fence.
Don't touch the fence. Take a look. A lot of electric fence is like a gray metal.
Yeah.
And you don't actually see it. People don't want unsightly electric fences, so they try to get things that blend in. So pretty much there is a safety barrier for the animals to help them from causing mischief and wreck your fences. It can hurt. So,
I bet.
especially if you're looking in like a cow barn or something like that, the voltage is up a little bit for you. Yeah.
So honestly, like just listening to you talk right here about it, like, when we asked you to come on the show, you're a little bit nervous, so I can say we're sure it's not something that, you do every single day. And I think like just having you come on and listen and talk for like the last 30 minutes already, I think the first thing I'll say is, your shit. So like, what you're talking about, asking every single question. Like if anybody's listening to the podcast, like we got a list of questions here because we're learning a lot about the farmland and the ALR at the same time and acreages and so forth, but you can't see these answers to these questions and you're just kind of slide them off. I think the biggest thing, my biggest takeaway right off the bat is the same as I would have said to anybody in any space, is to work with somebody that knows their stuff in whatever it is. Like obviously our focus is more finances and so forth. And this isn't something we practice all day long, but I think a huge mistake, just to talk frankly, from a lot of people that we meet who are working with, representative, a real estate agent, or anything for that matter, is they just kind of work often with very much a generalist. And that seems to me to be, especially when it comes to something so focused right like this, they should be working with somebody who's really knows their stuff about acreages. Like, so just out of curiosity, I don't want you to you're not going to give any names. I know you wouldn't do this anyways, but like, have you seen or have you experienced situations where maybe you heard about a buyer who bought an acreage or a farm and then you talked to them afterwards where they like just should never have bought in this property? Or
Yeah, you do hear about it.
Okay. Anything to share with us so we can kind of buyers beware to people?
I would just say, like any profession, just make sure you do your research on who you work with. Find somebody who, if they don't know the information, it's not the end of the world, but find somebody who's going to go that extra mile and find that information out for you, and really dig into what you're wanting to do, like what your desired outcome is. So, I mean, it takes all types. I think we've all gotten into situations we weren't super happy with. Acreages, there's a lot of money, a lot of time that you're putting on the line by doing that.
Yeah.
So it is really important.
Yeah.
Do your homework.
For sure. One thing I want to touch on today before we end this show is it's just a financing perspective, because being in the valley, we do see a lot of clients looking to buy an acreage with not really understanding like how much money you need down and how the appraisal is going to work. Like a lot of banks don't like farms that are actually being farmed because the foreclosure process is completely different.
Or even hobby farms too.
Exactly. So there's just a lot of challenges there when it comes to financing. And also it's not your typical 5% down scenario. It's not even your typical 20% down scenario in most cases. So just the financing perspective is so important to understand what you're getting into and having that bandwidth to actually do it.
And that's where you guys come in, right? So
Totally.
you guys are my go-to guys for this. Before we go shopping, definitely talk to your broker.
Yeah, I would say to echo Dean's point on that as well. There's a lot of people I talk to, just financially doesn't make any sense, not including the upkeep of the property. Like so just know your stuff before you get into it. And I think the biggest, takeaway from this piece as well, in addition to like working with someone who's an expert, is just like anything that becomes a little bit more complex. Like we talk about construction financing and other types of unique financing. Shit's going to go wrong. Shit's going to go sideways. There's things that you're not going to expect that's going to happen, and nobody's going to know the answers to every single thing. But it's about aligning yourselves with the people. So, hey, if you're a real estate agent and you're listening to this episode, as you probably figured out, there's a lot of stuff that you do not know. You should probably send it over to Tammy. I'm sure she'll take care of your clients like incredibly well and fill you in on the process as you work your way through it. What are your thoughts on that, Tammy? Something you do?
Yeah, I'm here as a resource. So if anybody has questions,
just take your hands off the wheel and send them to Tammy.
Well,
too, I'm here.
We haven't even touched on half of this slide. Like there's so much here. We could go on and on and on. So I would totally love to have you back and go into more depth here. And like to your point, if anyone has questions, like reach out.
Yeah. So if you want to find out more about farms, acreages, if you have a farm or an acreage that you want to let go of, reach out to us so we can put you in touch with the best of the best, and we'll get you all hooked up. If you enjoyed the episode today, make sure to just follow, share, post, like, and Tammy, where can we find you on Instagram?
Oh, Tammy Rose Realtor. That's my Instagram.
Cool.
And then same thing on good old Facebook.
Awesome. All right. So find Tammy on Facebook, Instagram. We'll post up the links.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, you guys. It was great.
Cool.
Thank you.